everyone, welcome back to Mind Matters. This season, I want to talk about prejudices, not just from a moral or ethical perspective, but really looking at how they operate in our brains. How do these hidden influencers shape our decisions? I explore how we think so we can reshape our world from the inside out, because in the end, every mind matters. Hello, and welcome back to Mind Matters. I'm Ivana, and today I will tie up my season on biases to our relationship to food. I will talk about how modern wellness culture, social media, and even the ways we categorize food might influence disordered eating patterns, particularly a condition known as orthorexia nervosa. I'll also touch on why we might want to reconsider that old 3 meals a day routine. For a while, diet culture focused on achieving a certain body size. Then it began shifting toward an emphasis on clean eating or looking exceptionally fit, often under the banner of wellness. In many ways, this new trend may sound healthier. After all, focusing on nutrient-dense foods and exercise is good in moderation. However, there's a growing concern among researchers that the pursuit of an ultra-clean diet can spin out of control. This is where the term orthorexia nervosa enters the conversation. Orthorexia isn't officially recognized as a separate diagnosis in most clinical settings yet, but many mental health and nutrition experts believe it's a distinct form of disordered eating. Instead of focusing solely on weight or calorie counts, people with orthorexia become deeply fixated on the purity or quality of foods. The idea is to eat as cleanly as possible. No artificial ingredients, no preservatives, sometimes avoiding entire food groups without medical necessity. That might seem harmless, but over time, these rigid rules can cause both physical harm due to nutritional gaps and mental distress due to the anxiety around anything considered impure. The rise of social media platforms plays a major role. We see influencers posting perfect meals, meticulously curated grocery hauls, or intense workout routines. This barrage of images can unintentionally fuel obsessive behaviors in people who feel they must follow those same ideals. According to a study by Romano and colleagues, 2021, labeling foods as strictly clean or unclean correlates with higher rates of disordered eating patterns. In essence, we've shifted from thin is in to fit is in, and yet the obsession with outward appearance often remains. Holman and Tilke, 2015, found that motivation to exercise for appearance reasons can reinforce rigid food rules. It's as if we replace the quest for skinny jeans with the quest for the perfect protein smoothie, and the anxiety around food remains. Let's look at the cultural pressures and the good versus bad food dichotomy. In Western societies especially, there's a cultural emphasis on productivity, self-control, and individual responsibility for health. On the surface, these seem like positive attributes, but when we apply a morality lens, good foods versus bad foods, we can set ourselves up for guilt, shame, and confusion around eating habits. For instance, Neumark, Steiner, and colleagues, 2006, found that negative self-image, along with a rigid set of food rules, can predict unhealthy dieting behaviors over time. When you layer on the social reinforcement online, likes, comments, followers, or real-life praise for sticking to these strict eating plans, it becomes even easier to slip into disordered patterns. Brytek-Matera also points to how society often glorifies pure or clean eating. When you put clean eating on a pedestal, it's easy to see how some might veer into obsession. The cultural message is, if you're not eating the cleanest meal possible, are you really taking care of yourself? This kind of question can lead to anxiety, which is where orthorexia often takes root. Alongside the clean eating trend, more people are self-diagnosing food intolerances or allergies without consulting a healthcare professional. One factor might be the sheer volume of social media influencers who've eliminated gluten, dairy, soy, or a long list of other ingredients, sometimes citing vague or non-specific sensitivities. But there's an important distinction between clinically diagnosed food allergies and self-diagnosed intolerances. Research by Gupta and colleagues suggests that while food allergies are certainly real and can be severe, public perception might outpace actual clinical diagnoses. Sickerer and Sampson emphasize the role of environment, genetics, and even misdiagnoses in how allergies are perceived. In other words, not everyone who cuts out gluten is doing so due to celiac disease. Some folks might just be caught up in wellness culture's wave of strict elimination diets. Sociologists like Nettleton, Woods, and Burroughs point out that diet culture has a powerful influence on how people label foods as problematic. It's possible we use self-diagnosed restrictions to feel a sense of control, or even to signal a certain identity. Of course, if you suspect a legitimate intolerance, the best thing is to see a qualified healthcare provider for testing and accurate guidance. I have been going on about how labeling entire food groups as off-limits can be problematic. That said, there are times when reducing or even eliminating certain nutrients is worth considering. A prime example is refined sugar. Refined sugars, like those in many packaged snacks and sugar-sweetened beverages, can play a significant role in the development of metabolic issues when consumed in excess. For instance, Malik and colleagues found a strong link between regular intake of sugary beverages and a higher risk of metabolic syndrome and type 2 diabetes. So this isn't just a wellness fad. It's backed by a solid body of research indicating that cutting back on refined sugar may indeed be beneficial for many people. One reason sugar stands out is that it doesn't come with essential nutrients. Many foods we might be tempted to label unhealthy still have valuable vitamins, minerals, or protein. But with refined sugar, like table sugar or high fructose corn syrup, there's not much in the way of added nutritional value. And that's why health experts often recommend minimizing it. You might also wonder if this advice is just part of the broader clean eating trend. The difference here is that eliminating refined sugar isn't the same as cutting out entire food groups, like all carbs, gluten, or dairy, on a hunch. Instead, there's a growing consensus in public health guidelines, including the World Health Organization, that people of all backgrounds can benefit from keeping refined sugar to a minimum to help maintain better long-term metabolic health. Now, the intention behind reducing sugar is key. Consider the difference between awareness versus obsession. Being mindful of how many sweetened drinks or sugary snacks we have each day can be a positive, informed choice rather than an anxiety-driven compulsion. And weigh in on what is balance versus restriction. If you decide to cut back on refined sugar, think about replacing it with whole foods, fruit, yogurt with natural sweetness, or even small amounts of natural sweeteners like honey, if that works for your diet. Just remember, moderation is still important because even natural sweeteners can contribute to overall sugar intake. Of course, nobody is suggesting you can never have a slice of birthday cake. It's the chronic, high-volume consumption of refined sugar that's most concerning. So if you're looking to make one realistic change to your diet without falling into rigid orthorexic patterns, cutting down on refined sugar is a scientifically supported place to start. Now let's shift gears for a moment. Even the standard of 3 meals a day, which many of us accept as normal, is rooted more in historical and cultural practices, or shall we say biases, than in our biology. Bruegel explores how we arrived at 3 meals a day, partly due to industrial-era work schedules. Looking at how meal patterns differ across cultures and history, showing us that the concept of breakfast, lunch, and dinner at set times isn't as universal as we might think. From a metabolic standpoint, there's emerging evidence supporting flexible eating schedules. Alberts, Peterson, and Brown discuss how time-restricted feeding, where people eat within a specific window, say 8 hours, may have benefits for things like blood sugar control and metabolism. Panda shows the role of circadian rhythms, suggesting our bodies might actually do better with less rigid meal structures, especially if those structures better align with our natural day-night cycles. And Matson and colleagues go further, looking at how varied meal timing could support not just metabolic health, but also brain health. The overall idea is that we can move away from rigid, culturally inherited schedules and instead pay attention to our hunger cues, lifestyles, and individual health needs. At this point, you may be wondering, okay, so how do I navigate a culture full of conflicting nutrition advice? Let's go through a few tips that might help. Avoid labeling foods as strictly good or bad. Our bodies are complex, and so are our cultural traditions. Foods can be nourishing in different ways. Also, we all have individual health goals or allergies to keep in mind. Seek professional diagnosis for food intolerances. If you think you have an intolerance or allergy, it's worth getting it checked out by a professional. Self-diagnosis can lead to cutting out entire food groups, which might cause nutrient deficiencies if you're not careful. Practice mindful eating. Tuning into hunger and fullness cues can make a big difference in how you feel overall. Sometimes we eat out of stress, boredom, or because it's just time to eat. Mindful eating strategies can help you identify why you're eating at any given moment. Experiment with meal timing. Don't feel locked into 3 meals a day if it doesn't suit your lifestyle or energy levels. Time-restricted eating or spacing out smaller meals may work better for some, but it's all about what feels right to you. Stay critical of nutrition headlines. Nutritional science can be complicated, and headlines don't always capture the nuances. Check if a study is peer-reviewed or look for systematic reviews that summarize multiple findings. Also note that a full reference list is always included at the end of Mind Matters episodes. Embrace cultural and personal diversity. Remember that not every diet or mealtime pattern is a perfect fit for everyone. Your culture, personal tastes, and health situation might call for adjustments that differ from someone else's approach. Address underlying emotional or psychological factors. If you find that worrying about the cleanliness of your meals is consuming more of your day than you'd like, it might be helpful to talk to a mental health professional or a registered dietitian familiar with eating disorders. So I covered a lot of ground today, from orthorexia nervosa and the obsession with clean eating to reevaluating why we eat 3 meals a day. It's amazing how deeply our eating habits and biases are shaped by culture, social pressure, and historical norms. In my case, I had quite a few awkward moments when I didn't join in on a large midday lunch. But it is not my natural meal timing, so I simply explained that and stayed a part of a social gathering. Ultimately, whether we're talking about orthorexia or meal timing, it's about striking a balance. No single eating pattern or rule set will work for everyone. The goal is to develop a healthier and more flexible relationship with food, one that doesn't leave you stressed out every time you look at a menu or walk down a grocery aisle. If you're noticing signs of disordered eating or you're overwhelmed by conflicting advice, it might help to reach out to a professional for guidance that's tailored to you. Thank you so much for joining me on this episode of Mind Matters. I'm Ivana, and I appreciate you spending your time here. I'll be back soon with more topics that keep our minds and lives moving in a healthy direction. Until then, stay curious and take care of yourself. I will link all the studies and references in the show's description. If you found this discussion insightful, please consider sharing it with friends, family, or colleagues. Let's keep the conversation going about how we can make this affluent corner of Europe a healthier, more equitable place for everyone. Until next time, remember, your mind matters, and taking care of it is the best investment you'll ever make.